my audience today is, I had a gentleman come to my table we had a convention in Las Vegas, and he came very sheepishly up to my table and kind of looked around. He says, "Hi, I'm Matt, so-and-so, so." It looked like he may have been retired. And he said, "You know those experiments or those things that you had on Star Trek?" He says, "I'm a physicist. I was at the White Sands Experimental Lab in New Mexico. I'm retired." He says, we wanted to see if we could take a person from one room to the other, like you did on the transporter." I said, "Well, you didn't." And he said, No. He said, "But it had to be organic material." So he said, we took a block of wood. He said, and we put it in one room, and we made the transporter just like on Star Trek, and we sent it, and it disappeared. And it showed up in the building down the block. And the guy said, "What's this piece of wood in here?" The guy called him. He had a little compass on it, so it would direct it where it went. They ran down into the building and went to look at it, and it was still floating in midair. And what they figured out is, we can't do this with a human being because it lost gravity. It lost gravity. So how do we work that one out? He said, "We just took a piece of wood and buried it outside because it was keep floating." We just buried it, put the dirt over it, and I said, "Oh my God."
You know, wood does float.
Yeah. So those are a few of the technical things, but what else can we?
So when you got hired for that part, they were hoping Jeffrey Hunter would come back and play it.
That's correct.
Because they were working in scenes from the first pilot with Jeffrey Hunter, who turned down the chance to be the captain, and that's how they got Bill Shatner. Best thing that could ever happen for Star Trek.
Regretted it for a long time.
And I remember reading in your book, by the way, Marc's book is amazing. You guys have to get this book, it's just amazing. That the Jeffrey Hunter character, which was Captain Pike, which I played, Kirk was Captain Pike. Jeffrey Hunter, on doing the pilot called The Cage, that was the first pilot, if you've ever seen it. It's amazing. For that time, I think it cost $3 or $4 million, which today would be like $10 million to make the thing. And he was reading something from the Rand Corporation. This is Jeffrey Hunter, when he was actually in the throes of doing the show. He said, "Wow," he said, "look what the Rand Corporation says is going to be the future." And he says, and Roddenberry, Mr. Roddenberry, he's got it right down. He said, Jeffrey Hunter really wanted to be in that series again. But I think with politics and his wife and some other people involved at that time, they didn't want him to, they thought he was a movie star, and they thought television was still second rate compared to movies.
And it would type him.
It would typecast him, exactly. So that is why Jeffrey Hunter didn't get the part, and I got the part of him.
They needed somebody who looked like
yeah, I looked
Jeffrey
enough
Hunter.
like him, I guess, but that
And then they put the makeup all on you, so we couldn't tell that you looked like Jeffrey Hunter.
A quick makeup story.
And the fact that he could act.
Yeah.
He didn't hoit.
But if you saw the interview, he said, first of all, he says, "You're going to look 80 years old." I'm sitting there, 24 years old. He says, "You're going to be 80 years old. Do you mind if we dye your hair white?" I said, "No, that's okay. Anything." Yeah. He said, "Okay." He says, "You're not going to be able to. We're going to feed you through a straw during the time you're on the set. You can't be eating food because we're going to tape down your face." And then he said, "Oh, and also you're going to be about 5.5 hours in makeup in the morning. Every morning you have to be there at 6 a.m. I said, "Okay." So you agree to everything?
I thought everybody had to be there.
So they worked on the makeup for me, and they kept experimenting. And one day they couldn't get the scar on my side. I tell the story, but I like it because it's so true. And the makeup was a purple makeup. If you look at the Captain Pike character, he has this terrible radiation burn on his face where it did not heal. And they kept putting makeup on. Well, the lights were called 5Ks at the time, and they were pretty bright and pretty hot. And all of a sudden, within 2 minutes of them filming me, it's dripping down my neck. And they go, "Uh-oh, what do we do? This stuff is dripping," and the makeup men were going. And one of the guys in the makeup room, young guy, he says, "I think I know what we can do." He says, "Why don't we cut out a piece of my blue jeans here?" And he got down on his blue jean with a crayon and drew a scar. He cut it out, and he taped it on my face. So when you see the Captain Pike character, that's a piece of Levi. and here's the best part, though. They would put it in a drawer every day. You know, they'd take it out, they'd put it on me, and about the 8th day, we were so damn tired. We were all like this, you know, it's like the 8th day, and all of a sudden, I'm looking up at the mirror, I'm ready to go out on the set, and I said, "Hey guys, something's wrong." I said, "What do you mean something's wrong?" The scar, no, we got, he says, I said, it's on the wrong side. So the last day they put it on the wrong side. They were so tired. Oh my God, they would have cost them thousands of dollars. They would have to reshoot everything. Because, you know, people would pick up on it. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
The last episode it was on this side. It crawled around his face.
And you know what they did? They flipped the film.
They flipped, they have to
Turn
flip all
it.
the film.
So if you look real close, you'll notice suddenly William Shatner's hair is parted on the
Yeah,
other side. The insignia is over here. So that, now this lady, you know, in the pilot, the second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before, which is the one that sold the series,
That's right.
the communication officer was black, but not a woman. It was Lloyd Hayes, who went on to be Pete Dixon in Room 222. And it gets, now the show's been bought. It's going to shoot the first episode of the Corporate Night Maneuver. And Lloyd's not available. And the director, Joseph Sargent, comes on the set. He says, well, I see an Asian. I see this man from Scotland. I see a man from another planet. And where's a black person on this bridge? And this is what we had planned in the film. So he went in and talked to Gene. Next thing you know, you're on a dancing engagement in Europe. And your agent calls and says, get on the next plane to come back to LA. And you did. And they didn't tell you what it was for. They just said you're wanted for a TV show.
I knew that traveling all over the world, which was what I was doing, was not what I wanted to do, as a career choice. And when I came back, I came running back. You're going to pay for it? So I came back, and when I knew what the episode was about, and I knew what the scene was about, and somebody stopped me and said, that's not the line that's on here. And I said, but it's the line that goes there. And they looked at each other, and the director looked first, you know, yes, but it said, I said, that's not how it goes. It can't do that. It has to be this way. So they get somebody down here, you know, we got an actress is uncooperative and so forth and so on, and Gene came down, and Gene said, what's going on? And they said, we've got an actress, and he says, well, she can't be on this set. And he said, good. He says, send her to my office because I need her to go through all the scripts. Oh, he was fantastic.
The best editor going right there. Well, you know, as an actor, when they call it paraphrasing. I've been on many shows where they say, oh, well, how would you say it? A good director will say that.
Yeah.
Because some of the words come out stilted. They sound like they're written, not read.
Yeah.
Or felt.
Yes.
So you would always say, hey, why don't you let me do it this way? And I go, you know what, better. Now the writers are on the sets of television. I remember with television, because when I came back as another character. They were very, very particular about how you said a certain line on the show.
On Star Trek?
On Star Trek.
Yeah.
Because they said, well, the writer wanted it this way, because technically it's not warp speed, it's not warp this, it's warp speed. You better say it's warp speed.
Yeah.
They wanted to stay on the curriculum of what all the dialogue was about. I understood that. But sometimes Gene, like you said, he'd have Joe Pevney was a great director. Joe Pevney directed me in two. He'd say to Paul, he'd say, just say it the way you'd say it, and I'd say, yeah, it's too stilted. I mean, we don't talk like that in real life, you know. And he said, paraphrase. That's what a good director.
Yeah, and was a good director.
Yeah,
He was
you
a
picked up on it. You
marvelous
picked up on it.
Absolutely.
It's too stilted.
Because we as the permanent cast did that all the time, you know. And you can't, if one person does it, you know, you can deal with that, get them thrown out for a few days, you know. But when the whole cast does it, and then it sounds right because we by this time knew what we were talking about, what the writer was talking about.
Exactly.
And writers would come in to see our first day of shoot. I don't have to worry. It was wonderful. It's and it's wonderful working with people like that
Yeah.
too, you know,
Yeah.
who understand that you understand and you're looking out
Yeah.
for them because you're looking out for your truth, you know?
Well, you knew your characters. And the writers would
Yes,
actually
exactly.
visit the show. Harlan Ellison would come down and watch them shoot before he wrote his episode. But you have to remember, too, that there was no science fiction on television. You had The Outer Limits, you had Twilight Zone, which had been on, but those were anthology series. And the only other one was Lost in Space. So you guys were, what the writers were doing, Gene, is they were inventing all this terminology and characters. How do you write for a Vulcan when we've never seen a Vulcan?
Well,
So
he created a Vulcan.
Yeah, and the problem is for the writers is the show hasn't premiered yet.
Yes,
You were shooting your 16th episode before the first one ever got on the air.
that's right.
So you're bringing in these writers and you're saying, okay, you're writing for this guy from Vulcan. Well, what is that? So that's why they had to actually flex your muscles a bit and create these characters and know how they're going to be. Now, it's a
That's
funny
right.
story. I told you before about this thing. Hey, I did it. I know you can do it with both hands too.
Infinite diversity and infinite combination.
Leonard Nimoy came
That's
up with
what
that on
makes
the
the
set.
world go round.
Yeah. Leonard Nimoy also came up with the Vulcan neck pinch on the set. I didn't apply any pressure because I don't want you to pass out. But this is funny, and this is Gene. This is the Gene you know. Too, is that in the script, Spock was supposed to give this guy a judo chop and send him to the ground. And Nimoy said, well, he wouldn't do that. He was talking to Leo Penn, who's Sean Penn's dad, who was the director, and Bill Shatner's on set. And they're saying Spock wouldn't do that. This is like the 4th episode they filmed. And so the director says, well, what would he do? And Nimoy says, well, Vulcans are very touch-oriented and they understand the nervous system of a human. So I think he would know pressure points and he would do this. And he says, Bill, come over here. Let me demonstrate on you. Bill Shatner comes over and picked up immediately on what Leonard wanted to do. And Leonard goes over and touches him here, and Bill Shatner rolled his eyes up into his head and just went down. And Leo Penn is looking at him and thinks he's really out. And he calls for some water to splash his face, get him back. They said, this is great, we got to do it. They did it. The next day, Gene Roddenberry and Bob Justman and everybody are in dailies, watching the footage from the day before, and they see the Vulcan nerve pinch for the first time. And you'll see in book 1 of this, Gene Roddenberry sends a memo to Leonard Nimoy, scolding him, saying, you cannot change things on the set because you don't know what we've written for tomorrow, and so forth. And he spends an entire page scolding him, but then he says, but we're going to use it, and we're going to keep using it. This was good, but next time come to my office with your ideas.
Because he wanted it to be his idea.
So it was an open door. You could come in with your ideas. Just don't surprise me in the dailies.
Absolutely, and there were many things that one of us, or more than one, created. Because we had directors that they would see it, because sometimes you just create it without thinking, you know, and it works. And so we became, they said, do it again, let's go from the top and get this right. And so the person that changed it would do what they did, which was changed it, kept the change. And what we did was adapted to it, which is what you do. You know, when somebody says something that is, crazy, you know, you don't just go like, it's okay. You go, huh? You know, but there are that's what we put into it, the reality
It's
of
funny,
real people in that situation.
And that's funny, I went up to his house one time, Gene was battling, he had just come from the Pritikin, I guess, hospital or whatever, and he was battling high blood pressure and all that. And Gene, yeah, and I was up at his house and I had an idea for a sci-fi movie, and he loved the idea. It was a time tunnel thing, like a film like Back to the Future. And he said, you know what? He says, I like it because you're taking real events. And he says, you got to remember this about Star Wars and Star Trek. Star Wars is believable fantasy. And he said, Star Trek is believable reality. It's just in a different time frame.
Yeah.
And that was what Gene Roddenberry wanted people to be impressed upon by watching Star Trek versus Star Wars. And I know George Lucas, he met me a couple of times right after I did Star Trek. And I think George would agree with that, because George, amazing with fantasy. But Gene had that reality thing. You gotta figure this guy had been an LA cop, he had been a pilot, he'd been a bomber pilot in World War II. He saw death and dying. He was a brilliant man, writing and doing, and so you come with that sort of history about yourself. You know that you can write those things, because there's some people who haven't experienced life that I meet, and they're writing these shows, and I'm going, these people haven't even lived. This guy lived. This guy was the real deal. When I interviewed with him for Captain Pike, he knew exactly the right way to ask me the right questions, that I would not cringe or freak out, but I would say, yeah, I do get it. Because like you said, when we were talking the other night, if he knew you got it, he liked you.
That's right.
Because if you didn't get it, he couldn't use you.
Yeah.
He couldn't use you because he was on a time crunch. He had to get this done under budget and this and that. And if you didn't quite get it, and I got it, I was in the military, I was in the same Air Force unit he was in the Far East. And he kind of knew I knew that, and I was only 24, so we had a synergy already.
And another wonderful thing about him was that if you did change something, whether an accident or on purpose,
Sure.
you knew what you were doing.
Yep.
And if it did come, and you pull, especially if it was an accident, you know.
Yep.
And Gene was the kind of person that if it was, he said, well, no, wait a minute, let's look at that.
That
Yes.
was right.
That-
He'd go look at it
Yeah.
on the dailies.
Let's look at that.
They wanted to see.
Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And actors felt safe to say, well, this is what it meant to me, because I thought, I didn't know whether it was printed wrong or some, and then they'd start laughing with each other, you know, because one dares not say the writer did anything wrong. But it's not the first show, but one of the very first shows that took something like that and and the director said, well, let's look at this, you know. And whether it was your idea or somebody else's idea, or the guy back there stumbled into the room and said, oh, I'm sorry, you know, or something like that, it fit. If it
That's
fit,
right.
It worked.
They used it.
If it worked,
They were
it
smart.
fit.
They were smart.
Yeah.
Well, you know, when the show went on, I was, I think, 14. You were 16. You were maybe 15. I don't know. I was 14. And
I was not.
and there was an episode you may recall, named Charlie X.
Oh, yeah.
Dorothy Fontana, one of the first women writing in science fiction, certainly, that Gene brought onto that show. But Gene did the rewrite on the script. Gene wrote this scene in, Dorothy told me, and it's in the memos as well, where Kirk has to explain the birds and bees to young Charlie Evans, who you sing to in the episode and so forth. But and he's explained to him that there's a million things in the world you can have and a million things you can't have, but he wants Jen and Rand, he wants Helen and Rand. And he's saying, I feel sick to my stomach every time I'm around her. And Kirk's trying to explain to him that that's the way all men feel from the age of about 15 on, when they're around women and all this. I remember this episode distinctly because I was starting to go through that for the first time in my life. And there was not another show on TV where I got to see that explained to somebody. But that's what Star Trek did every week, is to explain things that the other shows were afraid to touch. And that are still ahead of their time. You look at an episode like Amok Time, about the salmon swimming upstream and sexual urges and things like that. That's even unusual for television.
Well, even
now.
yeah, and I worked in one called The Taste of Armageddon. One of my episodes is Lieutenant Paul, and I was just amazed about, here we were, the Russians were going to bury us. This is 1966, and nuclear war, and the kids are still going under their desks at the school.
So I have a question.
Because of a nuclear bomb hits, you got to know where to go. Yeah, under the desk, hello. And so when I saw,
This is true.
when I saw the the dialogue, and I was the navigator on that show because George was doing a movie in John Wayne movie. He was doing Green Berets. So I got to be right there with Doc and Scotty. And all of a sudden, here's the real quick plot. It's about two planets that were fighting each other for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they were killing each other and then they decided, hey, let's just have a board game. If you lose, your people have to turn into the destruction chamber, and they're wiped out, humanely. We just wipe them out. And then if you lose on your side, you'll get your 50,000 people and put them in there, and you'll just obliterate them, kindly, right? And I thought, wow, man, if this goes into Russian TV, wow, whoever in the leadership of Russia might say, this could be what we could get to if we don't get the nukes solved. And sure enough, at the end, Shatner, I'll never forget, it was a great line, he says, hey, you know what, you guys are so, human and kind of humanely doing this war. Why don't we just have an good old-fashioned war? We're going to blow your ship up in about 10 minutes, and we're going to kill everybody on it. No, you can't do that. You get it? We don't do that. No, I think I should do that because then you guys might figure out what you're doing is not right.
Bring back the horrors of war.
Bring back the horrors of war. I mean, nobody would put that on today. You would not see that today on what's going on in the Middle East. You would not see that today on television. They'd say that's too close. We're already scaring the public with the news.
I think we need Star Trek back on TV.
But
one of the things I enjoy doing these books is I get to crawl through these memos and really get to know even Gene Coon, who never gave any interviews because Gene Coon passed away very young, shortly after Star Trek left the air. Now you get to read his 20-page memos, which I'll cut down a little bit, and you get a sense of his personality and what he's thinking about. But we hear about the brilliance of Gene Roddenberry. I got to experience it, and you will too, because you'll see him dictating the idea for episodes at midnight after he's put in 16 hours at the studio, and he comes home, and he sits down, and he's dictating the teaser and the entire first act of Blood's Women. And it's scene by scene what's going to happen. And he hasn't worked out in advance, he's just talking into a dictaphone. And that's where you see the real brilliance of these amazing people. We talked about this last night over dinner, that Star Trek was magical. When you think about the people that were brought together, it's like a magnet. Imagine Star Trek without this lady. Imagine Star Trek without William Shatner, or Leonard Nimoy, or Gene Roddenberry, or Dorothy Fontana. It's just this incredible thing. It's trying to say, imagine the Beatles without Paul McCartney. It's just something that had to be. And you can't explain it, you don't know why it happened, but thank God it did. It's there, it's going to be there for all of us to enjoy through our lives, and for you guys to take those messages, little morality plays, but positive.
That is so true. That's what we knew back then, and I said it on the set to Gene Roddenberry, and he said something. I said, these are reality plays. This is like a reality play. And he said, of course it is. That's what good TV is.
Should be.
Should be. Right.
He said is because we were the is.
You is there.
Yeah, we were the is. We were doing it.
Let's take a question or two from the audience.
Yeah.
And I have a couple cards here, but the room's not that big, so I think we can hear you okay. Anybody have a question for Sean or Nichelle or about Star Trek? Yes, right here in the blue shirt.
This young man right here.
Yes.
Okay, I'll do it up front.
Oh,
Two questions.
two
I'll
questions.
give it over. Will you remember them if I tell you them or if you don't?
Yeah, you.